Hello, everyone, and welcome to Serious Coin, the podcast where we have rich conversations about wealth. I'm your host, Kelly Willis Green, and this is the final episode of Season 4. And I'm so excited about what we have in store for you today, because we're talking about a subject that I think resonates with every heart. Whether you are a parent, a grandparent, or anyone invested in the promise of our future, you will want to hear my conversation with parenting expert Dr. Michele Borba. We're talking about how to raise kids who thrive and how to avoid the entitlement trap of affluence, because I know that is a top worry for many wealthy parents who are fearful that their kids will become spoiled or robbed of motivation because of the money. Well, Michele Borba's new book, Thrivers, The Surprising Reasons Why Some Kids Struggle and Others Shine, is the subject of our conversation today, and it's rich, full of science-based insights and practical tips and real-life stories from kids, some coming from some of the most prestigious schools in the U.S. And Michele has lived and breathed this work for 40 years as an educational psychologist and a best-selling author of 24 books. She's also an NBC contributor. She's been on the Today Show 150 times and countless others, including Dateline, Dr. Phil, The View, and CNN, to name just a few. And I'm thrilled she could be my guest today. In this episode, Michele and I talk about everything from the 7 character strengths that define thriving kids to the 3 signs you should watch for that your child could be showing signs of materialism, and what parents and grandparents can do to help their kids avoid the entitlement trap. There is so much in this episode, I promise you. Michele wrote Thrivers because in her decades of work, she says she has never been more concerned than she is today about the current generation. Listen as she explains why.
Well, first of all, they're well-loved and they're extremely well-educated kids, and they come exactly the same as always. But they're also, this generation, the loneliest, most stressed, most anxious and depressed on record. And that's a big, huge concern for all of us.
And what about children of affluent families? What have you found to be their unique challenges?
The research is really clear on one little thing, and that is the more affluent the child, the higher level of depression and anxiety. That is a huge red flag for us, but there's good news that parenting can be changed. And if we're aware there's a problem or a deficit, we can join forces and figure out, so what do our kids need that we can do to make sure that they thrive? Now, the reason I wrote Thrivers is because I was so concerned that 1 in 5 American kids was going to suffer from some kind of a mental health disorder. And that's from the most prestigious organizations we have, from the CDC, from the American Medical Association to the American Psychological Association. They were all warning us that something was different. Then came COVID. Whoop, on the drum roll. And we're now at 1 in 3 American kids suffering from a mental health disorder. But let's not be so quick to blame COVID. It only amplified a pre-existing issue. That means we need to reboot our thinking about what does this generation need to be able to flourish and thrive in a kind of an accelerated, digitally driven world.
So, Michele, what was that pre-existing issue?
I think the one issue that I'm concerned about is that we put all our time and energy into thinking that what's going to make them happy and successful is that college degree or the money in the bank account, when we do know that now what they're going to need more than ever is the ability to bounce back, uncertainty. They need skills that are called resilient skills. And the best news is it's not another tutor. It's not another program. It's just simple things that we can do on a day-to-day basis from birth, till womb to tomb to help raise up a generation of kids who thrive.
Okay, that's a good segue to thriving. In your book, you identify 7 character strengths, and I want to dig into a couple of them in a moment. But if you could walk us through very briefly, what are those 7 and how did you decide on them?
Well, Kelly, the big news is after we knew there was a problem, it was down to let's start looking at the science. And the most amazing thing is that none of my original parenting books that I either wrote or read had this kind of information. And it's phenomenal new science that's actually been tracking children who are more resilient, kids who can bounce back, who do thrive regardless of zip code, regardless of parent size, regardless of birth order. And they find that they have 7 things. It starts with confidence, that you know who you are. It also comes with empathy, that I'm being able to get along and think we, not me. A third one is self-control, to be able to manage that stress and cope and take that anxiety down a notch. Integrity. That's our values, whatever they are inside our little guys, so that they have a value system, a strong moral code. And then comes curiosity. That's a child who can think outside the box. That there's a problem, it goes, well, that's okay, I'll do this instead. Perseverance, they don't give up. They keep on going the whole 9 yards. And finally, the most important, I think, is optimism, or a sense of hope, that regardless of what happens, there's going to be a silver lining. Not that the kid's going to be a Pollyanna. He's got a reality base, but he's not going to be so clouded with pessimism that he just gives up. Instead, these are kids who say, I got this.
I listen to that, and I think those are the qualities of entrepreneurs and wealth creators.
Yes.
So, that's speaking to thriving, and I want to come back to that. But let's talk for a moment about self-control. I thought that was an interesting one. And maybe this is my bias because I was the kid who still had my Halloween candy at Christmas. So I had a lot of self-control. But you describe it as a secret ingredient for success.
Look, when our kids are little, we want them to self-soothe, right? And we do everything we can so they can self-soothe. But the same thing happens when they get older. They've got to be able to figure out how to wait, which will definitely enhance their focusing ability, their success in that classroom, their success, as you mentioned, out there in the real world. But the other thing, it helps them learn to control and manage the stress. Stress, Kelly, is part of life.
Mm-hmm.
But if we keep allowing the stress to get to levels that are higher and higher and higher and higher, what happens is it goes into anxiety and depression. Then goes your cognitive ability, your emotional abilities, all the abilities. But the most amazingly wonderful thing that we overlook is that we can teach our kids coping strategies. And it starts with, first of all, we got to model calmness ourselves, because we're a lot more powerful than we give ourselves credit for. Our kids need the example of how to watch somebody who's calm. But the second thing is, depending upon age, we can start, I think, wonderfully noticing our kids a little more, tuning into them. When do they start to blow? When do they start to get a little more irritable? And you'll notice that too often what we do is we wait for the exorcism. The kid's in full wail, flailing along, and then we tell them, calm down. It's a little late. But if you really, really, truly, maybe stick up a little calendar. Don't let your kid know that you're watching them. But track, when are they more irritable? Or the times they're more irritable, or what the situations are, or who are they with? And you'll actually begin to see a pattern. That's step one. But next of all, what are his body signs? It's called body check. And you'll see, interestingly enough, your kid will do the same thing. Some girls, they start to hold their hands in a little fist, or you'll see some little kids, their feet go back and forth, or they grind their teeth, or they go back and forth with their chair. Makes no difference what it is. If you see that continued pattern, the next thing you simply do is say, I notice that right before you start to get really irritated or angry, here's what you do. Now, that means I see you rocking in your chair, or I see you taking that deep breath. What you're trying to do is help your child. I don't care if he's 43 kind of a kid or two. Start to recognize what the signs are, because then you can teach him coping strategies.
And they recognize it within themselves.
Yes. And remember, agency, I got this.
Michele says that cultivating self-control and a sense of calm can be learned and taught. She told me that scientists studying 50,000 individuals worldwide found that every person can improve their mental health. The key, though, is to find what works for you and your child. And it may be different for every member of your family. Whether it's drawing deep breaths, or shooting hoops in the backyard, playing the piano, or meditation, it must be what works for that kid. And here's the good news. It can be effective with only a few minutes a day. Michele told me how she drew inspiration from one student she interviewed from the Dalton School, an elite private school on New York's Upper East Side.
Natalie from Dalton, Kelly. She's absolutely a pistol, extraordinary. But I said, Natalie, why aren't you as stressed out as all of your friends? They're just like over the top. She says, I know, it's disturbing, isn't it? I said, yeah, what are you doing so you're not so stressed out? She says, I listened to Mozart. I said, okay, Natalie, let me tell you, I was not prepared for that answer. How did you discover Mozart helped you soothe? She says, my mom, she's really kind of crafty. All during COVID, she kept playing music during all over our house. And every time Mozart came in, my whole body would kind of decompress. I said, so what'd you do? She says, I loaded my iPad up with Mozart. And every time I get stressed, I listen to Mozart. I'm going, what a brilliant idea, crafty mother. She knew that her kid craved music, but didn't know which kind of music. So it's introducing things, and maybe your child can find what works for them.
Right. And another strength that I thought was related to self-control, but different, is perseverance, and sometimes called grit, although you make a distinction. I think a lot of people would be familiar with Angela Duckworth's research and talks on grit, and it's a major predictive factor of success.
Yeah.
So tell me about perseverance.
Perseverance. There isn't a person out there that doesn't know how to say that that is absolutely critical. And yay for Angela Duckworth, because I love her work. But here's the piece that we overlook. We've been pushing the kid. Why aren't you motivated? Keep on going and don't give up. But perseverance is made up of self-control. It's really hard to hang in there and keep on going when you're lack on the focusing or your stress level is too high. And by the way, Kelly, it's also made up of confidence. We know that we persevere in the workplace. Gallup told us if we are engaged in activities that we love or we're good at. So one of the things we want to do is make sure that our kid, when he goes off to college or wherever he does in a career, is doing something that he or she loves and enjoys, because that's the first part about perseverance, is choosing it. So you get into that flow state that you can't give up because you enjoy it and you love it so much. The second thing about perseverance, I love the research from the University of Chicago, is that kids persevere, back to the agency, if they feel they can do it, they've got it, and that their effort makes a difference. So all of the research, this is Carol Dweck is telling us, stop praising the kid for the end product, what you get, or that was 100%, or why'd you get 70%? Instead, what you praise is the little effort along the way. You're hanging in there, sweetie. Yesterday you were at 5, today you're at 6. That's what an Olympic coach does. They never say jump in the water and get the gold medal. They say, here's where you were yesterday. Now let's go for a split second more and a split second more. And then they talk you through how to get to the next step up. What happens is now the child has that growth mindset. I can do it if I put it into working a little bit harder and a little bit harder. And you show them how, where he should be working. That's the goal.
And when you talk about flow and doing what you love, it reminds me of that old saying of find something you love and you'll never work a day in your life.
Oh, don't you love that?
Yeah, it's universal advice. Okay, so tell me if I'm off base here, but it seemed to me that how the kids that you interviewed described their challenges and their stress was the actual proof of a lack of self-agency and problem solving. And that it seemed to me that most of the reasons they were struggling in their minds were because of factors outside themselves. It was a failure of parenting or the education system or society's expectations in general, as opposed to thinking about how they might problem solve.
You nailed it. Here's why. Once I realized we had a problem, and I kept looking at the 1 in 3 American kids are going to suffer from a mental health disorder. And I looked at all the scientists, and the scientists all confirmed it. So I said, okay, now I'm going to talk to the kids. And I interviewed dozens and dozens of wonderful, extraordinary kids. And they opened their hearts up. But a commonality kept coming up over and over, Kelly. These are kids from very prestigious schools, every age, every demographic, but across the US and above and beyond. But they kept saying, first of all, empty. I feel like I'm empty.
Oh.
I'm never enough, which is a concern. And the second thing I kept hearing, which just hurt my heart so much, is that they were being moved away from the flow, what gave them the passion. And one of the things was, I remember one kid, he was reading Thrivers himself as a book club read with a group of teens. And the first question, he goes, why did you write this for parents? You should have written this for us. I said, well, what did you like about it? He said, well, the first thing is, do you think guitar is a strong enough passion for me? And I said, well, you're asking me that. Do you love guitar? He said, Oh, you have no idea how much I love guitar. It soothes me. I go to it and I get myself into a whole different octane when I'm there. I said, well, why aren't you playing it? He said, well, my dad says it's not a high enough goal for me.
Hmm.
I said, but you're not using it as a goal. It doesn't sound like you're trying to be Paul McCartney. He said, no, I just use it to help me get myself back into balance. So I think there's another thing, and that's a clue from that kid. Over and over, kids were saying they didn't have time for the thing that they needed most, which is the healthy hobby.
No time for healthy hobbies or unstructured play? Feeling empty and never good enough. It was deja vu for me from my conversation with Jan Gerber in an earlier episode. Jan is CEO of Paracelsus Recovery, which is the world's most luxurious addiction and mental health treatment center. And Jan spoke about how these childhood issues are showing up as mental health ailments in the adults he treats. Could these kids be Paracelsus' future patients? I think that's the reason Michele is so concerned. And she's not alone.
You know, I speak to a lot of university presidents. They are really concerned. One of the other reasons I wrote Thrivers is I was speaking to 2,500 mental health counselors across college campuses. They said they're the smartest group we've ever seen, but we've never seen such an empty group. University presidents, University of Chicago, Harvard, Yale. One thing they said, warning parents, the number one time an American kid is most likely to drop out of school their entire life is end of freshman year, first semester of college.
And why is that?
Well, first of all, they're getting pushed into a subject or a major that isn't their passion. And second of all, they don't know how to cope with their first B plus. They're doomed.
Wow.
The University of Chicago was noticing another thing that was concerning. Remember, of the 7, the second trait was empathy, relationships, interactions with others. Well, University of Chicago president said there are yellow sign markers the first day of school, all indoors in the dorms. I said, what do they mean? They said the kid doesn't want a roommate because he doesn't know how to get along with others. We're seeing, I think, a rise of depression amongst us as well as the kids. And it's because it's been a couple of years where we had to social distance. And all of a sudden we realize people are one of the best ways to reduce our mental health problems. And that's what we crave.
And it does make me think of another topic I want to discuss, which is the impact of technology. Because again, it was eye-opening for me to read your book because it painted a very different picture of kids' concerns than maybe what I had thought previously. This notion that you're talking about, they're so stressed over marks and they're competing with their friends. They say, as you say, they don't have time for things. And yet, a lot of times when I talk to parents of tweens and teens, their biggest challenge is getting their kids off their digital devices long enough to focus on homework and family life. So let's talk about the impact of technology and in particular social media. In your book, you cite 4 major research studies showing that happiness and mental health are at their highest when digital consumption is between 30 minutes and 2 hours a day. And from what I hear, kids are spending much more time than that on their devices. What are your observations around that?
Well, Kelly, I think the first one is you're right on the mark on that. It's a concern. But I think we also overlook something. 66% of American kids say we're the grown-ups are the ones too plugged in, not them.
Interesting.
So step 1 is watch your own behavior, because I think we overlook that. Let's go back to the kids and why is social media impacting them? First of all, they are digital natives. They are being raised and grew up in a time where they did not know anything but internet. So we're going to have to realize that's part of their lives. But what the kids are saying, once again, here comes from the kids, they're having problems reading each other.
Yeah.
These are kids in the most prestigious schools. This is Milwaukee schools, Chicago schools. I mean, what do you mean? He says, I guess it's because we're so used to looking down, not up. And that now when we get to with each other, we're first of all afraid to how do you have discourse with somebody and how do you have it civilly, because we don't have discussions like that. And so we're kind of like more risk adverse. These are kids saying this, not the research. And second of all, empathy, the gateway to empathy, feeling with another person, is emotional literacy, Kelly. You got to be able to look at the person's face and go, she looks upset, or their voice tone, he sounds frustrated, or look at his body language. Oh my gosh, he looks really irritated. Kids say they don't have those skills. Now, number 1, find the time when you want to disconnect as a family. I don't care when it is or where it is. It could be around the dinner hour. It could be the family hour. It could be whenever, but disconnect it. Number two, walk around quietly without your child knowing it and see how often they are plugged in. They will be plugged in. But my question to you is, what are they plugging out of?
Meaning?
If it's people and connection, there's when you should worry. A third thing you may want to do is start talking feelings and emotions just naturally. Hey, you look upset, or let's go to the mall. Gee, look at that woman's face. How do you think she's feeling right now? Natural ways of rebuilding emotional literacy. Our kids are craving it. Empathy in American teens. Oh, this is another drum roll and doom. This is Sarah Conrath, who's been looking for 30 years at incoming college freshmen in hundreds of universities and found that empathy levels have nosedived 40% in American kids in 30 years, while narcissism, I'm better than you, self-absorption has gone up 58%. That is not a recipe for flourishing and thriving. So the solution to that is just start again looking at what's going on in your own home. Are you having interactions and time with one another? The most important thing, Kelly, if you don't do anything else, please remove your child's phone before he goes to sleep. We are finding that today's kids are the most sleep deprived children on record. You're asleep and you don't realize your kid is still texting.
Yeah.
They want to sleep with their phone. In fact, another study said they're more upset of losing their cell phone than if they are to lose a finger. So start taking the relationships and the conversations back.
You mentioned narcissism, and one of the things your book pointed out is that too much praise of kids can backfire, and that's partly what's creating this narcissistic society.
We got ourselves on the self-esteem bandwagon. And in all fairness to us as parents, we did all of this stuff because it was told it was going to help our kids. But in reality, what the new research is saying is, it does not raise a happier kid. It doesn't raise an achieving kid. Self-esteem is wonderful. Confidence is better. Confidence is a silent understanding of who I am. What are my strengths? Second of all, feel free to praise your kid, but it's not 24/7. It's only when it's deserved. Stop giving him a trophy for showing up or breathing, and don't give him a trophy because he's 20th. It's like amazing what we've done as a society. The research does say if you praise a lot more on not what did you get, but praise the character. We don't do that nearly enough. Thank you for being kind because, and then point out the reason that you appreciate that gesture of whatever it was. Thank you for being so honest. I know that was difficult, but here's why it's valuable. What you then are doing is remember that fourth character strength is integrity. Character integrity is made up of character strengths. And all the research says is we're very quick to praise the grade and the test score, but we don't talk nearly enough about the values and the character traits we see in our children. When we do, they internalize them. You act how you see yourself to be.
That's good stuff. Michele, I want to come back to the unique challenges of raising kids in an affluent environment, because a very real concern for parents with wealth is the fear of raising spoiled, entitled kids who lack motivation to succeed on their own steam. And it's very common, especially to first-generation wealth creators who did not grow up with money themselves, and now they're deeply concerned that the money will ruin their children. So I know it's a loaded question, but what are some ways to avoid entitlement, and what signs should parents be on the lookout for that might indicate a child could be headed in that direction?
The first thing we got to do is zero in on what kind of kid do we want our children to turn out to be. If you don't want an entitled child, you've already done step one, meaning that's what I don't want. So what I'm going to do instead is start praising the opposite. I think that's so simple. Number two is remember there's no gene for spoiled. So we have only ourselves to blame for that one. But what you want is a child who really has gratitude. By the way, one of the highest correlations to real happiness is gratitude and appreciation. It's not wanting more. So start looking for me. Everything is about me. What do I get? It's about me, me, me. When you see that, that's one indicator that your child is becoming a little bit more self-absorbed and he's always into comparisons of himself. Johnny has one, so I need one. Or, but why can't I? Another one is the brand. Do you know that by the age of 2 and 3, our little guys can tell you almost every brand there is? So watch that. And now, I want it this minute is another concern that you want to delay the process. Now, how do you do it? There's lots of possibilities on that. I love the story on David Rockefeller. The story of the Rockefellers, I don't know if you're aware of it, but they did pretty well in terms of affluence as a family.
Yep.
And when you look at all the affluent American families, they're one of the ones that have the least scandals.
True enough.
But I love the story about David Rockefeller. His father was the wealthy one. He said that actually one of his friends at school is the one who had to point out to him that, you know, you're in a rich family. And David was like in a state of, really? Who's rich? Your family. He wasn't born to be like that. Why? Because his father decided we're going to be more charitable. His father decided, here's another thing, we're going to start giving back. Here's another way to get rid of the entitlement. Become a charitable family. Put a box by your back door, just a box, and it becomes an ongoing charity box. Now, what do you do with it? Every time you're done with a puzzle or a gently used book or a gently used backpack, everybody in the family loads it up. And every time the box is filled, here's the biggest thing we do wrong. We do it ourselves and we bring it to a charitable foundation. Don't. Bring it together as a family. It becomes memorable. Every kid I interviewed told me the moment that changed their life was when they gave to someone and the look in the person's eye was kind of teary-eyed and such gratitude that the kid said, I just had to do it again. I had to do it again. They see themselves.
It feels good. The helper's high.
The helper's high. So there's another one that's so simple and easy. The other one you can do is for the now. I want it now in instant access. All you have to do is click a button and you've bought something. Instead, you just put a delay process. Think about it, 24 hours, and maybe you can get it later. But if you always make a delay to it, what happens is they think about it a little more. And then, do I really need it, or is it just an instant I have to have it this particular moment?
I want to ask you about the role of grandparents. And again, I want to paint a specific picture. Let's take the first generation wealth creator, someone who's now in their 70s. They have adult kids who now have children. And we all know the statistics. In every culture, there's an expression for shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations. By the 3rd generation, the wealth is dissipated. So what role can or should a grandparent play, particularly one who's concerned about entitlement in their grandchildren, ensuring that the family continues to flourish and prosper in every sense in the 3rd generation and beyond?
I love that question because grandparents are so influential, enormous gains they can help with the child. First of all, with the values. So here's my values. You may have slightly different ones from your son or your daughter-in-law, but when you walk into my house, here's what our values are. The second thing I would be really cautious about is overdoing on the birthday and the Christmas and the holidays with the presents and the presents and the presents. I spoke to a couple of very, very wealthy grandparents and they said, enough is enough. It's just, the kid doesn't just appreciate it anymore. So we decided to do something differently. I said, oh, tell me what? It said, every year we have a conversation with FaceTime before the holidays began. And we talk about what are your strengths? What do you love? What are you passionate about? And then what we do is that the present that year is a gift for, if it's ballet, then you get ballet classes.
Lovely.
And an outfit to go with it. If it's equestrian riding, then you get to have equestrian riding, but you have to send me a note every once in a while or a journal about why you love it and how you're going. But it was, I thought, oh, how brilliant is that?
Yeah.
Because certainly you have the money, but you want to be able to put it that it's a benefit to the child. I think that's a glorious concept.
That's beautiful. We've talked about all these challenges. I'm so curious, how do you have hope?
Oh, I talk to kids. The greatest thing I get to do is talk to children. And every time I talk to them, my heart goes, oh, flitter flatter, especially the ones who are doing such extraordinary deeds. They're worried about the world.
Yeah.
I mean, let's have a moment of silence here on what our kids are facing. When I ask them, what are you worried about most? Legitimate stuff, climate change, gun safety. They're worried about, all kinds of politics, but they're also worried about racism. And they're very concerned right now about hate.
Mm-hmm.
But over and over, what many of those kids are doing is take it upon themselves with others to do something about it. They're not changing the whole world, but maybe they're doing pick up trash along the beach and they're doing it together as a group, but it's giving them purpose and meaning. I think what is missing in our children right now is we love them dearly and we want so much for them to succeed, but we're pushing them into the direction of how we think they will need in order to succeed, as opposed to who you are and what will help you succeed. Purpose is one of the highest correlations to well-being. It gives you a sense of meaning and it gives you a sense of hope. So watch maybe over the next few weeks, your child. When are they most passionate? What are they concerned about? And when they are concerned about something, then don't just go, can't do anything about it. Well, that's a really big concern. I'm so glad you shared it. Have you thought about something we can do together, or have you thought about something you can do? When you put activity into it and they choose to do something. I mean, in California right now, our kids are so concerned about homelessness.
Mm-hmm.
So what can you do? Well, gosh, 3 kids decided they were going to start going around door to door, knocking on doors and asking for extra overcoats and giving it out to homeless. You can't believe the change it made on those kids' lives because they were giving, not getting.
We talk a lot about purpose in this podcast, and I think that's purpose and meaning are vital at any age. And it actually comes into play again when people retire or after they exit a business. So it's always something that is relevant and critical to happiness, as you say. Thank you for writing this book and for joining me to talk about it. I think it's a terrific guide for parents. I read it. I'm not even a parent, but I found myself self-scoring myself on different strengths. And I want to shift gears a little bit, as I do with all my guests, and ask you a couple of final questions that might give insight as to your thoughts on money.
Mm-hmm.
So if I could ask you to finish the sentence.
Uh-huh.
To me, money is?
Oh, probably security. It certainly is a luxury, but I get to choose what I want to do with it. And I think you need to know that I spent a lot of my lives working in some very, very, very impoverished areas. And I can see that it gives me a sense of safety and security when people have nothing in some of the areas that I'm working in. I'm talking about Africa and overseas. Just horrible. But even I'm working in very, very impoverished areas in the United States, and we fail to see what some children are up against.
What is the best piece of financial advice you've ever been given by someone, or maybe you gave to someone else?
Oh, no, it was my dad. My father was just absolutely wonderful, but he was raised in the Depression. So he'd always tell me a penny earned is a penny saved is a penny earned, Michelle. So it was really, I learned to be more frugal. And probably in the end, I can see some of my friends who are always worried about brands and concerns and money. I don't have any problem on that. I've got what I need and I want. But my dad is, as always, I watched him after all what he had to endure with his family from the Depression, and it taught me a lot.
So self-control is one of your character strengths. Well,
Self-control.
Lastly, who is someone you admire with respect to how they handle great wealth?
Oh, I'm back to the Rockefellers. I love the stories, and I would suggest you all go back and just look up David Rockefeller. There's a YouTube tape of an interview that he did. I'm sure it's on there for quite a while, but and I also remember reading biographies of his father, that an allowance was critical. But though I love the point where the kids came in and they wanted an allowance raised, and the dad said, "You don't get it till next week." that was it. And I went, I think I read that book 30 years ago, and it was still, wow.
It stays with
There's
you.
one of the wealthiest guys saying, "Nope, you don't get the allowance. There's no loans next week."
Well, I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. She's really something and a bundle of fun. I want to thank Dr. Michele Borba for being my guest. And if you want to pick up a copy of her book, Thrivers, you can find it wherever you buy books. And as I said earlier, I read it and I got a huge amount out of it, and I'm not even a parent. But it's also so interesting for me to see how the themes overlap and interconnect between my various guests. If you enjoyed this episode, in addition to the one with Jan Gerber that I already mentioned, I encourage you to have a listen, if you haven't already, to my conversation with Charles Lowenhaupt, because he echoes Michele's message about the importance of purpose and the fact that he has never seen a family that is functional around wealth without some form of contribution to community. Very much aligned with what Michele had to say. What can I say? I just eat this stuff up, and I'm so thrilled to be able to share it with you. This is the end of season 4. I can't believe we've done 24 episodes and we have more to come. If you want to hear more, please subscribe so you get notified when we drop season 5. Until then, thanks for listening to Serious Coin. Serious Coin is provided for your general interest only, and nothing we discuss should be taken as investment, tax, legal, or other professional advice. Always talk to a licensed professional before you make any financial decisions.